terrible storm. It was all Jonah's doing. And Jonah was thrown overboard. So what happens next? Now the Lord had prepared a follow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of that fish 3 days and 3 nights. I don't think any of y'all are surprised. Maybe you've heard this story before. But what kind of fish was it, you ask? It was a Pacific macrocephalus. You might know what that is. Huh? It's a sperm whale. So the sperm whale, it's big enough, certainly. It has a throat that is large enough to swallow a human whole. It breathes air, which means that there would be pockets of air inside of it. It'd be a little gassy, but that'd be all right. And they travel about 50 to 75 miles a day. They are native to the Mediterranean Sea. And so 3 days and 3 nights, about 200 miles, give or take. And that would put Jonah about right here. If it was a straight shot, we don't know. But, and actually that is the place where all these storms get so bad. This is about the area where Paul had his shipwreck in the book of Acts, if you remember that. But anyway, and then Jonah prayed unto the Lord, his God, out of the fish's belly. And I pray too. What is recorded in this prayer is Jonah's emotions, and he found himself saved from drowning, but in an altogether unique situation. There are a couple historical recordings of this happening. Nobody lived through it. The whaling ships, some of them guys got swallowed whole by a whale. When they cut that whale open, they found what's left of him. But an altogether unique situation. Now, this prayer itself is incredibly personal, and that kind of gives testimony that it was Jonah himself that wrote this account. Now, when we read the story, we find it in the third person, and a lot of people say, well, an autobiography wouldn't be written in third person, but actually it would be. That's the way ancient autobiographies were recorded. They all put it in third person. So as we look at this prayer, one of the things I want you to recognize is that a lot of these is quotations from the Psalms or paraphrasing of what is found in the Psalms, particularly these Psalms that are attributed to David. Now, any devout Jew, they would have these memorized. They would have known them, and especially the ones David had written. Now, maybe we can learn how to pray better by looking at Jonah's prayer, so we can find something out of that. And so we began where Jonah began. And what did he do? He prayed unto the Lord his God. If you'll recall, in the story of Jonah, he wasn't claiming the Lord was his God. He was a prophet of God, but when he got this assignment that was not pleasant, he stopped claiming it. And in fact, it wasn't until the midst of the storm that Jonah fessed up and said, yeah, this is my God. And so he prays unto the Lord his God. And this prayer, as we look at it, it's about a rescue. It's already happened. It's already accomplished. And so this sudden and climactic manner in which Jonah found himself in this situation, it seems to have clarified things for him. And that's what difficult circumstances tend to do. Before this event, Jonah didn't want to die. Going to Nineveh, preaching to the Ninevites, that was a death sentence. And it wasn't just a death sentence, it's one of the worst deaths imaginable. The things that they would do to their enemies or dissenters or political opponents, and especially to the foreigners they were prepared to conquer and subjugate. But now, he's as good as dead. He's already crossed that threshold. He's already been to the other side. And so that man of faith reappears. So let's get started. And he said, I cried by reason of mine affliction unto the Lord, and he heard me. out of the belly of hell, cried I, and thou hears my voice. Because my affliction, out of the belly of hell. And the word is Sheol. It means the grave. In the Old Testament, the terms that Jesus used to describe hell, that's not found in the Old Testament. Jesus used a word, Gehenna, and Gehenna refers to a valley outside of Jerusalem, and it was known for, you've heard us talk about the worship of Moloch, where they would sacrifice their babies on a brazen altar. And so Gehenna is this place, a place of fire. And Jesus talked about that, but Sheol is the grave. And a better definition is the unseen world. Okay? Many people today, they're in hell already. They haven't died yet. But they're in an unseen world. They're in a place where people don't pay attention to them. Either through their own actions or the actions of others, they've gone underground. And they're unseen. And Jonah says, God heard me, right? He's not unseen. Yahweh hears his voice. He hears him. You know, Jonah's circumstances, they're of his own making, right? He chose flight over fight. He paid the fare to run away. He endangered everyone with his cowardice. And sometimes we're too ashamed of our actions to pray. I did this to myself. What do I do now? How do I approach unto God? And it's not like I didn't have warning. It wasn't like I didn't see the signposts ahead. And so what do I do now? And we do. We deserve our fate. Absolutely we do. But Jonah prayed in such a place, and we can too. We can. He says, thou hast cast me into the deep, in the midst of the seas, and the floods compassed me about. All thy billows and thy waves passed over me. This is interesting. Jonah did recognize that the plight he was in was a form of Yahweh's judgment. It's a just chastisement. But he also recognized that God preserved him. His life was not the least bit enviable. I can't imagine anyone who'd want to trade places with him, but it wasn't death. He assumed that's what's going to happen when you're cast overboard. So he recognized whatever this isn't death. There's something else going on. And the reference to the seas, the billows, the waves, he has this firm conviction he should be dead. What usually happens when you're thrown overboard a ship in the middle of a storm? You drown. You die. It's awful. But he isn't. So he recognizes something else is going on here. And then he said, I am cast out of thy sight, yet I will look again toward the holy mountain, or thy holy temple. In the first chapter, we found out this is what Jonah wanted. He wanted to be out of God's sight. Remember, this is just the third verse. It says, Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish out of the presence of the Lord. And that phrase, the presence of the Lord, literally means, I want to get to where he can't see me. I want to get far enough away that God doesn't know what it is that I'm doing, out of his sight. So Jonah tried to escape his mission by getting out of the sight of the one who gave him the mission. You know, a poor comparison is you're at work, the boss gives you an unpleasant task to do. And so what do? You hide for the rest of the day, hoping the boss forgets about it. This is what Jonah's plan was. I can get far enough away, and God will get somebody else to do it, right? Maybe he thought Yahweh was like the gods of the sailors. You know, when the storm came up, all the sailors were praying to their gods, lowercase g. And we talked about it last week. These ancient gods, lowercase g, they were all local. They served a community, a geographic region. Once you got outside that geographic region, there's another God. And you dealt with that one. Maybe Jonah thought that's what was going on, or maybe he thought he could just get far enough away that somebody else would have to do the job he did not want to do. But we know it's impossible to escape the eyes of God. Jonah learned that as well. His eyes behold the children of men. That's also from the Psalm of David. But sometimes we can get so far out of his will that we can't recognize his presence any longer. We're so far off the path, and we can't find the path anymore. There's something else familiar with Jonah's words. I've also been in terrible circumstances, and most of them have been of my own making. But by God's grace, I've always looked toward him, and I've always looked toward his temple, drawn to him, connected, and distance can't sever that. In fact, sometimes the further away that I am, the closer I am to him. And I don't want any of you to be in this terrible plight, but I do hope you can feel that connection too. We may abandon the way of God, but God never abandons us. And I have not clung to the cross, but the man on the cross has clung to me. And that's good. And so Jonah continues, the waters compassed me about, even to the soul. The depths closed me round about. The weeds were wrapped about my head. I went down to the bottoms of the mountains. The earth with her bars was about me forever. Yet hast thou brought up my life from corruption, O Lord, my God. I don't think we can imagine the nightmare that he's in. As good as dead. He's immobile. He's closed in. He's surrounded by darkness, putridness. That's how you spell it. I looked it up. And this warm, wet crushing of a stomach. That's where he finds himself. And he's still aware. And that's probably the greatest part of this nightmare. Is that he knows this is happening. Literally buried alive and fully aware of what's going on. Knows what's going on. He could feel the changes in pressure as this beast descended deeper and deeper. He could feel, I am beneath the mountains. I am underneath it all. This gangrenous putrefaction of digestion is eating at his skin. What an awful place. He says, thou hast brought me up from corruption. And what that literally means is, you have rescued me from decomposition. You remember the story of Lazarus? And Jesus says, roll the stone away. And what was the response from Martha? It's been 3 days. He stinks. He has faced corruption. And this is what Jonah means when he says, you have rescued me from corruption. You saved me from decomposition. This would be my worst nightmare. I can't imagine this, to be buried alive and feel your flesh rotting. I would have prayed for ignorance. I would have fainted, hoping I'd never wake up again. Just, right? And in fact, that's what Jonah did. He says, when my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came in unto thee, into thine holy temple. How about that? That's pretty cool. First he looked toward God's temple. Now he prays toward God's temple. And somehow he knew that God heard that prayer. They that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. This is Jonah's sermon. What is the lesson that Jonah teaches us? We don't hear anything that he says to the Ninevites. This is his sermon, right? It's lying vanity to imagine that your situation is too great for God. I've heard this from so many people. You talk to them about the Lord and you talk to them about grace and salvation, and it's a source of pride for them to say, oh, he can't save me, or he can't forgive what I've done. I know it. And they're bragging, really. They're not confessing. They're bragging. Look how great I am. And Jonah says, those that trust lying vanities, you're forsaking mercy. It's available. You're forsaking it. It's a lying vanity to think that you have exhausted the strength of grace. I've gone too far. I've gone too far. And again, you're bragging. Here's what the Bible says. Where sin abounds, grace does much more abound. And if you'll listen to the lies of your own pride, you'll forsake mercy. It's a lying vanity called pride that keeps your lips silent. How can I pray? How can I pray? I know what I've done. I deserve this. I deserve worse than this. It's a lying vanity to call any situation hopeless. It's a lying vanity to hold on to a wrongful path out of stubbornness. And I've seen people do it. They know what they're doing. It's not wise. I'm going to do it anyway. Why? Because it's a lying vanity to embrace this gambler's fallacy that I'm too invested to turn back. We've done it. We're going down our own direction. But man, I've gone too far. I've invested too much. I can't, right? Those that observe lying vanities, they're forsaking mercy. Mercy's available. It is. But here's the thing about mercy. Sometimes it's humiliating. And some people are just too proud for that. Mercy is given to those of a contrite spirit, those that can find repentance, those that cast themselves upon mercy themselves. All right. And so Jonah says, I will sacrifice unto thee with a voice of thanksgiving. I will pay that I have vowed. Salvation is of the Lord. Okay. This is Jonah's redemption. Jonah remembered his God. He calls upon his God. And I want you to notice something. In this prayer, Jonah never asked God to save him. That would be exactly what I would be doing. Jonah doesn't do that. He never promised, I'm going to change. You give me a second, just give me one more chance. I'm going to change. Didn't promise that. No, Jonah firmly believed that this was his just end. And here's the other thing. He figured he would never, ever again be at an altar where he could offer the sacrifices of God's law. And so I'll give you the only thing that I can give you. Thanks. Thanks. The only sacrifice he could give. And having thanked God, Jonah is now ready to pay his vow. What is the vow, you ask? Anybody want to know what the vow is? Who wants to know? You want to know? I don't know. I have no idea what it is, and I'd imagine it'd be different from all of us. I don't know what vow you've made. I don't know what burden you've accepted. I don't. But the payment, the final payment is the same for everyone. It's death. It's your life, right? Jonah is offering God his life, surrendering it. Before, Jonah was doing everything he could to preserve him. And now, as good as dead, it's yours. You can have it. He's not pleading for deliverance. He deserves what he got. But he is looking toward God. He prays to God. He has faith with God. And now, he'll die knowing salvation is the Lord. Sometimes, well, all of the time. That's enough. And the Lord spake unto the fish, and it vomited out Jonah upon the dry land. That's all I got for this week. I don't want to start the next phase till then. Questions? Comments? Anecdotes? All right, Wade dismisses.